This is a video on how to do baking. So what we have here at the moment is this mesh. This was Lucus mesh. This is Lucus mesh that I'm using. Not was, still is. But I edited quite a bit. I kind of cleaned up some places and fixed the topology and whatnot. And what I'm showing to you right now is the UVs here in the UV editor, as you can see. Although from doing this so many times, and now that I've gone back into it, I realized a couple of things. There's a reason why the normal map didn't come out as good as it should. In particular, along this line here, along these edges here, the normal map didn't show really good. So what happened was, if I can show you, let's just focus on this part. I intended to, I mean, if it's a hard edge, if it's angled like this, let me just select that part. So you see that this is actually, I mean, in terms of normal, if I were to switch on the normal display, face normals here. How come? Oh, now it's showing. What? Okay, okay. Anyway, so you don't select the face. I forgot. That's how you do it. So let's just drop this down a whole bit. 0 0.2, 0 0.1. Okay, that's clearer. Okay, I want to focus on this part here. Right here. You see the bulu here, right? The things that are shooting out from this guy. Let's just drop it down a whole lot. So you see the green things, the green lines that are coming out of these faces here. Right, those are lines that are showing. The lines are showing where the normals are pointing. So for each face, this line represents where the normals of each face is facing. So that's for that, and that's for that, and so on. You'll see that right about here, it kind of changes direction, goes the other way. Here, it's kind of in the middle. So you can say that this is the middle point here. This along, I mean, along this line here. That's where the normals are kind of facing a different way. Well, this is facing that way, and this is starting to change. Right. So now we got that out of the way. Let me just switch off the face normals first and get that out of the way. That gives me an idea of how to UV unwrap this guy now. So it's gonna go along this line here. So maybe a good idea is to kind of separate the islands along this line here. So this is what I'm doing exactly. And on this part here, I say I'll separate it along this line here. So that's why that's a separate shell. But what I did notice as well is, let's see if I can show it to you. If I press 3, it's starting to show that problem. You see here, if I focus on this part, you see that that's not a nice unwrapping. Whenever it subdivides, it's starting to show me a bad unwrapping. So that's not gonna work. I'm gonna experiment on something now. Let's see if subdividing it would do a good job. So let's just close this out. I'm gonna get my outliner. This is my beveled version. I'm gonna duplicate this by pressing Ctrl D. There it is. So I'll hide this guy first. So I got this version, and I will call this high poly. Remember, this is just an experiment. I want to see how the UV editor the unwrapping looks like after I do a subdivision. So I'm gonna go to mesh and smooth this out. Right, I am interested, like I say, I'm interested to see how it affects the UV unwrapping. Right now, this is what I see, and I'm just gonna apply a open sub div one level. Okay, not on that. I want to do it on every single mesh here. So hit apply. Alright, press 1. Okay, it's not giving me a nice effect. See, it kind of retained that effect, so that was not nice. So I'm gonna undo. Let's use Maya Catmull Club. Hit apply. Still the same result. If I hit smooth UVs unchecked, that does a good job. That does a good job. Yes, I like this. Do this. So I'm gonna subdivide it 3 times using Maya Catmull Club. I didn't use the open sub div. Crease all is the setting here for boundary rules. Continuity set to 1. Smooth UVs unchecked. Everything leave it as it is. No hard edges whatsoever. Right, this is all soft edges. And I'll just hit apply. Sweet, I'm happy with this. This is the high poly version. Okay, so I will call this beveled high poly. That's the beveled one, which is low poly. So I'll hide this. I'm gonna grab this guy. Here's where I'll export my FBX. So I have my beveled version here. This will become my low poly. So I'll go to File. Of course, I select all the meshes here. These guys here, the beveled ones. This is my low poly. And I'll go to Export Selection in the Options box. I'll choose FBX Export. If you don't have this, again, you go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager, and search for FBX. What you want is fbxmaya.mll to be checked in loaded and auto load. If you don't check this, this will not show up. As well, if you're looking for OBJ, you gotta make sure obj export.mll is checked. That way, only then you would have FBX export as well as OBJ export. I think in the new Maya 2020, they kind of switched this off for faster loading time when you start Maya. So that's the whole reason why. Right, so it's very important that we explode our mesh. As you can see here, all my meshes are in the same spot. In order for you to do great baking, you need to explode it. And what that means is simply placing them in a different position so that they have their own space for baking and it will not interfere with the other meshes. So I'm gonna do just that. So what I'll do first is I'm gonna select all my meshes here that is visible, and I'll hit S on my keyboard like so. You'll see that all this is now set to it's all red in the attributes here, and there's a tick here at frame 1. I'm gonna go to frame 5. It doesn't matter, you can go to frame whatever. It's just a different keyframe, a different frame basically, and then I'll hit S again. Okay, what happens is you've created a new keyframe, and I'm going to select this guy and I'm gonna explode it away. So I'll push this up. Maybe I'll just place this as, put this as 1 so that it's a nice, perfect number. And I'll bring this down, nice rounded number of -1 there as well. That's kind of good where it is at 1, 2, and we'll say we're okay. And just to be sure, let's just go back. It can collapse, it can explode. Sweet, that's for the beveled part. Alright, so I'm gonna select all this. I'm gonna go to File, Export Selection. This is Edit Preset, so I'll hit that. I don't want my high poly setting, I want to get my low poly setting there. With low poly, I have three things checked here: tangents and binomials, smooth mesh, reference assets, content. So hit close, that's pretty good. This is the low poly setting and export selection. And I'll just overwrite this one. I give it today's date, low poly. Yes, replace that, everything's good. And let's just hide this and let's open up the high poly mesh. Again, we need to explode this guy. And for that, I'll go to frame 1. I'll just do a keyframe by pressing S there. S on my keyboard. Go to frame 5, hit S again, click this. And also I have auto key check here. Auto key is toggle on. That's why whenever I move it up like that, it'll immediately create a new key there. So if you don't have it there, you gotta press S in order to create that key. Anyway, press 1 here. So you might want to check auto key here, so you know it makes your life much more easier. That way I can just move it here in place, hit -1 here, and it'll create a key automatically here. You can check going back to frame 1 and you'll see everything's collapsing. If you go back to frame 5, everything's exploded. This is to -1, this is at 1 in Y. Sweet, everything's good in the world. Select the high poly meshes, go to file, export selection again, right? Go to edit preset. Let's go get not this one. I want to get the FBX high poly setting. So I got smooth mesh and triangulate check. From a lot of trial and error, I say this is a good setting. If it doesn't work, we're gonna fix this again and by going back in Maya, but we'll say this is good for now. Export that selection, and I'll say this is my high poly. So I'll say export selection. Do you want to replace? Yes. Sweet, we got the exploded meshes. So I'm gonna open up Substance Painter now, and we're gonna do the baking in that software. I also want the one that looks like this, but not exploded. So I'm gonna select all this now. It's basically the same mesh, but I'm at keyframe 1, which is not exploded. That's exploded. This is not exploded. So I'm gonna select all this again. Go to File, export this selection as a low poly mesh. So that's a low poly setting. Close. Export that selection, low poly, but we don't rename it. We're gonna give this a different name. We'll call this is the one that I want to texture. If you want to make it really clear, texture this. Okay, export selection. Sweet. Let's go to Substance. We're gonna do the baking now. Okay, I'm gonna close everything so you got the same interface like mine. So I'll go to File, New. You want to work in the PBR metallic roughness workflow. We want to amp up the resolution to 4K if your computer can support it. Everything should be okay here. And we'll go to select. And I need to find that file. I'll just Control Shift S because I just want the assets. Link. Cancel that. So I'm gonna place it here in Substance. We got all my FBX here. Maybe it's a good idea to clean this up, but that's okay. I hope you can follow along. What I'm trying to grab here when I first start a new project is the low poly file that has been exploded. Okay, so I'll double click that. Sweet. Hit OK. So it's gonna bring in the low poly file as you can see here, all exploded nicely. Right. Something to note is everything's kind of edgy here. It's like it looks very low poly. It is low poly from Maya, and everything's kind of not smooth. What we're gonna do is we're going to bake. What exactly? We're gonna bake this high poly information. All the nice smoothness here, the roundedness that you see in this high poly will get baked into this low poly using Substance Painter. To do that, we're going to open up our texture settings. I'll just drag that out. Let's just make this big. Why not? Alright, so this is all good. I'll hit bake mesh maps, and that's gonna bake every single map that you see here. Normal map, world space, ID, which we don't really need right now because I don't have that. It's gonna just, so I can uncheck that. Maybe AO, curvature, position, and thickness. So I'll hit bake mesh maps. I'll just crank this up to 496. Like I say, I don't really need ID, so I'll uncheck that. It's asking where the high poly mesh is. So the high definition mesh can be linked by hitting this button here, and I'll go find my high poly mesh, which is this one that has been exploded. So when I click this, it's going to reference this file there, high poly FBX. It will not load it in here, but it's going to kind of, when it's baking, it's going to refer to this really, high res mesh that you see here. That's what it's going to refer to. All right, everything's good, and it's going to say 6 textures selected for baking. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to bake for only one shader because I only have one shader here. I mean, if I select this is only a RoboMax 005 shader. Everything has the same shader here, same material, if you may. All right, and I'll say bake selected textures. So let's just let it do its job. It's gonna take some time depending on how many materials you state. I only have RoboMat 005, and that one material would have 6 mesh maps that will bake into this low poly mesh. So give it some time, and I'll see you in a bit. Alright, everything's done, and now we can hit OK. You can see the normal map has been created. It's been plugged into this low poly, and that's why you see everything's kind of smooth there. That's pretty sweet. Although, if you go this way, you can see it kind of edgy because, this is essentially a low poly. So it's going to show that low polyness. Right. So now, I mean, it's not nice to texture like this, right? Everything's exploded. So we're going to figure out how we can, instead of using the exploded file, I want to use this file instead, the one that's collapsed. So if you go to Edit, Project Configuration, it shows this. Right now, it is pointing to low poly FBX. That's why you see this. Our maps have been generated. It's looking pretty sweet here. So I'm gonna change this not to that low poly, but this one, the low poly texture disk file. Double click that. Everything's okay. Hit OK. Ta-da! Right, and then you see that you have your mesh nicely baked here in Substance, and it's ready for texturing. Although some of you might feel that this is so low poly, it's not really what I want. I mean, it's hard to tell, like, how that texture will lay out. I mean, in places like this is good because the normal map kind of works, but at the borders here, that doesn't seem to work. So how do you work around this? So a workaround is to basically go back here, and you can subdivide it one time. So you could perhaps, select that group, Control D, so that creates another group. Let's just hide this one, and we'll call this bevel, but this is mid, and this is the one that you want. Texture this. Okay, hit 3, and you get that. So I hit 1 again. I'll go to Mesh, smooth this guy. I set the division levels to 1, and I hit Apply. Close that. This is still there, so hit Q to commit that. There's still a history there, so I'll just go to Edit, delete the history so that's light and nice. And then we'll export this guy again. File, export selection. Just check that you are using low poly. Sweet. Export the selection. I'll say texture this. Export selection. Yes, I want to replace that. We'll go back to Substance now. And will it update automatically? It doesn't seem to want to do that. So we'll go to project configuration again. We have to kind of plug it again and hit OK, and then it will update. Although it's not giving us a nice effect. What is going on here? I'll go back to Maya. So this is my workaround. So I got this. I want to texture this. All this while I was using that one, right? So what I'll do instead is, and this is not so bad. If you look at the amount of faces, that's only what, 9,000. It's not that bad for a hit. So I'll hit S here. I'll go S here again, and I'll just blow this up again. Go to 1. That's -1. Sweet. Alright. Alright, nice and rounded. We'll say that's okay. Select all that. We'll just export the selection as a low poly. Yes, replace. I'm gonna do the baking yet again, right? And I'll crank it up to 4096. I'm gonna select the low poly mesh. Okay, hit OK. Discard this. So I got that nice and smooth. Although I can add more details, so I'm gonna bake it. So I'll say bake, and I'll just crank it up to 4K as well. Go get my high poly mesh and bake, and I'll see you in a bit and we'll see the result. Alright, everything's done. Hit OK. So now that's a nice bake. Everything looks good. It doesn't look really bad. I mean, there are a bit of artifacts, but I'm not gonna bother too much with it. That still looks good. We'll say that's good. Alright, and we go to the project configuration. We'll select the texture disk and hit OK. That still gives us a nice bake. And I think this is okay. Yeah, exactly. Well, there are some bits here. Like, if you see here, that looks tessellated. And that's basically a modeling thing lah. So, in your modeling, if you look at this guy, that still looks tessellated, isn't it? Let's see the high poly one. Does it do the same thing? It still does the same thing. So maybe a thing that you could do, I mean, if you see this kind of thing and it's not kind of you don't like the look of it, maybe you would consider selecting that and I don't know, bring it in a bit so that when it subdivides, it doesn't give you a hard crease like that. Right now it is a hard edge because everything's hard edge there, but that's something to fix if you find that to be bugging you. I mean, it's bugging me certainly, but I'm not gonna bother too much. That's basically, if you know how to fix that, by all means do fix it. But overall, this is a nice bake, and I can texture this straight away. And that is how you do baking. In the next video, I'm going to show you how after texturing, you can use the export textures command here in Substance to export all your image maps to be plugged back into Maya. And therefore, I'll see you there. Bye.